I've noticed that when it comes to trends, everyone has a slightly different understanding of what it means to work with them. Indeed, within the broad trends industry, there are many different types of professionals. So what I'd like to do is give a really broad and brief overview of each of the major types so that you can get an idea of what the whole field is like. Let's start with cool hunting, one of the most widely known forms of trend analysis. Cool hunting emerged in the early 90s as a very marketing-focused form of trend spotting, typically done by people out on the streets looking for trends that were more related to design and fashion. Cool hunting, as it's known, has sort of evolved in the modern, more internet-y age into something that can take place both on the streets but then also online, on blogs and on various other channels. So cool hunting is not necessarily the strictly street photography-centric thing that it was back in the day. Closely related to cool hunting is trend scouting. Sometimes people use the term cool hunter and trend scout interchangeably, but trend scouts are often associated with just one industry. You may just be a fashion trend scout, and people often specialize in this area. You can, if you like, think of trend scouts as an industry-specific trend focus, like sports scout, like a basketball scout or something, looking for the talent, the trend of a specific industry. Very similar to industry-specific trend scouting is industry-specific trend analysis or trend predicting. One really good example of this is WGSN. They are a fashion forecaster. They release regular reports and they do other very fashion-oriented things about where the industry is going. Now, while some trend forecasting companies are very large and very well known, there are many people who focus on trend forecasts that are very targeted both geographically and in terms of the thing that they forecast. There are people, for example, who analyze local census and construction data to give local pool construction businesses an example of who's going to be building new pools or exactly how fast that industry is going to be growing in a particular year. Speaking of very local trend forecasting services, there are also localized trend spotting agencies. These are different from industry-specific trend forecasting companies in that they focus on a specific geographical region. For example, there are companies that focus only on trends in Tokyo. And instead of just focusing on, say, the fashion industry, they will focus on everything. They'll look at local retail, design, packaging, yes, what people are wearing, but also what they're watching, what they're doing. And they'll often give clients trend tours or ideation sessions based on the cool things that are happening in that specific area. You'll typically only see city-specific or area-specific trend agencies in cities that are known for developing cutting-edge cultural movements and new fashions. So not very many cities have dedicated agencies. Now, because many trend-oriented companies are associated more with the marketing and design side of business, many trend-oriented companies also offer ideation and product design and even sometimes advertising and marketing. So you can also think of many idea-based, creativity-based companies as being in the trend industry. Also associated with the trend and marketing industries are the market research companies. You may not necessarily think of them as specifically trend-oriented, but of course they are. They're taking polls and surveys and various bits of data and looking at how they're changing over time so that their clients can know what direction different industries are headed in. That's definitely trend-oriented. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier that there are industry-specific trend forecasting companies, and sort of related to those, but in a more general sense, are trend analysis companies and individuals who don't necessarily focus on a specific industry, but take present data and take their understanding of different trends and developments and emerging new technology and analyze the situation to create predictions for where we are going to be going in the future. The gist of trend analysis is this. Professionals who specifically call themselves trend analysts look at historical data, present behavior, and then combine those with their knowledge of emerging technologies to create predictions for the future. Somewhat related to trend analysis is scenario planning, which is a slightly more structured approach to predicting the future. Interestingly, scenario planning grew out of World War II from the military, and it was first applied in the corporate world in the oil industry, with some great success, so it moved on to the rest of the corporate world from there. Scenario planning is interesting in that you take the data that you have, historical data, current data, and instead of just creating a general vision for the future, you create several feasible scenarios, and then you develop plans for each of those. So you have contingency plans to help you pretty much no matter what happens. And then we have the area called Futurism, Futurology, Future Studies. It's called many different things, but it pretty much involves looking at, again, historical data, present trends, future technology. But instead of just creating predictions for the future, they also, futurists tried to shape the way that the future will be. So they are building the future just as they are trying to make predictions about it. Some futurists come in the form of scientists and other writers, but many futurists are dedicated writers and show up in the form of science fiction writers. So many science fiction authors are, in a sense, in varying degrees, futurists because they are shaping the way in which we will live in the future by influencing the way that we view it and inspiring us to develop new technologies or live in different ways. But they're creating these new scenarios by looking at trends from the past and the present and applying them to their analysis of where they think we're going. It's quite interesting. Finally, within the trends industry, there is trend setting. These, of course, are the influential people who, in many ways, like science fiction authors, develop new trends, who influence and shape the future. They don't necessarily predict it, although they might have a nose for things that have great potential to catch on. But these are the people who many trend spotters attempt to find. So we've kind of come full circle from cool hunters and trend spotters and forecasters to the actual people who are creating the world in which we will live tomorrow by influencing us and inspiring us and building new things and ways of living. So in a very rough nutshell, that's a basic look at all the different trend-related things there are out there. As you can see, the trend industry is very fragmented. These people aren't necessarily working together and everyone has a slightly different method, but the work that all of these people do, whether they are futurists or cool hunters or trend analysts or trend setters, is fascinating. So we should all pay more attention to them and appreciate their work. To be honest, to a certain extent, everyone has to be a trend spotter because that's the only way to successfully plan for the future. So the more you understand the methods that the professionals use, the more perhaps you can successfully create a future in which you win.